Just a reminder, if you can, thank you. So first, I want to welcome everyone. This is Shannon Johnson. I'm excited and grateful to be here with you today. We've set aside an hour and a half for this meeting this morning. At any point, if you have questions for me, feel free to use the chat box or text me. I know for some of you that's easier, especially if you're on a small screen. So let's start with our Lori. Can you handle roll for us?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Crystal Aguilard.
Here.
Melissa Anders.
Here.
Jennifer Barnes. Cade Brumley.
I'm here, thank you.
Kim Canizero.
Here.
Susanna Craig.
Here.
Zenobia Curtis.
Here.
Holly D'Amico.
Here.
Tori Flint.
Here.
Carolyn Gore.
Here.
Deborah Jo Haley. Gwen Hamilton. Richard Hartley.
Miss Gwen, I think you were muted. I saw your mouth move, but we didn't audibly hear you.
Gwen Hamilton is here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Hartley. Dana Hunter. Shanda Johnson.
Here.
Dejanay Clark Jackson.
Here.
Arthur Joffrion.
He's trying to log on.
Okay, I'll repeat his name in just a moment. Elena Magnus.
Here.
Kim McAllister.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here.
Brandy McNabb.
Here.
Larkin Page.
He just logged on.
Okay, I'll come back, no problem. Dana Perilou.
Here.
Libby Sonia Neto.
Here.
John Weibel.
I'm here, thank you.
Richard Hartley.
Let me see if oh, there he goes.
Larkin Page.
I see him. I just don't know if he can hear you.
And Richard said here as well, right? Because I see him on as well.
Yes, Richard is here. Just, I see Larkin Page. Are you here?
Let's see if I can get to him and unmute him. Oh, he looks frozen in the picture. Larkin, if you can hear me, try turning your video off. It might make your signal stronger. Or you can try calling in on a different device. I don't know if he can hear me. Let me try chatting then. And everyone, thank you for your patience.
Chanda, we have a quorum.
Okay. Thanks, Lori. I appreciate it. So I am now going to read the certification of inability to operate due to lack of quorum statement that I read at our last meeting. In accordance with Executive Proclamation JBE 2020-59, issued by Governor John Bel Edwards on May 14th, 2020, the Louisiana Department of Education is providing for attendance at essential meetings via teleconference or video conference as allowed during the pendency of the COVID-19 health emergency. Pursuant to Section 2C of JBE 2020-59, the LDOE will provide attendance for the Early Literacy Commission meeting on Tuesday, June 9th, 2020, via Zoom and in a manner that allows for observation and input by members of the public as set forth in the notice posted on June 3rd, 2020. The Early Literacy Commission would otherwise be unable to operate due to quorum requirements. Okay, thank you for your patience, guys. So our next item on our agenda is approval of minutes of the May 28th meeting of the Early Literacy Commission. Would someone like to make a motion there?
So moved.
And just so that we can get it for the minutes, who made that motion?
Gwen Hamilton.
Thanks, Gwen.
This is
And do we-
Sonia. I'll second it.
Thank you. Okay. The next item on our agenda is consideration of the Early Literacy Commission membership. So given the interrelatedness of the Early Literacy Commission's work with our State Board of Education, the department thought it would be beneficial for Bessie to have an official voice on the commission, official voice. So with that in mind, I would like to make a motion to add Bessie President Sandy Holloway as an ex officio, which means non-voting, member of the Early Literacy Commission. Do I have a second?
I second.
I second Dana Perilou.
And then any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. Welcome, Ms. Holloway. And I believe I speak for our entire commission when I say we look forward to hearing your input and drawing from your years of experience as a Louisiana educator as we tackle this most important issue facing our youngest learners. So thank you, welcome, we're excited to have you. Okay. Next on our agenda is the consideration of the on-site review framework. Do I have a motion to open that discussion?
This is Carolyn Gore. I make a motion to open the discussion.
Thank you. A second?
This is Dana
Curtis.
Perilou. I second.
Thanks, guys. And thanks again for your patience with the technology. It makes meetings fun. So I'm going to start with some updates as promised. Since our last meeting, we have had a document with some suggestions in regards to the framework that Lori and I shared with everyone. I did share those suggested revisions with Sarah and her group, who of course brought the framework to us at our last meeting. The feedback was reviewed and they determined that they weren't going to make the suggested updates. And the reason they gave for that was because they felt that the framework as it currently stands incorporates the recommendations from the Early Literacy Commission almost verbatim. So they decided that they were not going to make any changes. So, so as promised, some updates. So this matter is now open.
Shanda.
Motion. This is Carolyn. I make a motion to endorse the framework as it is written.
I'd like to make a
Shanda.
substitute motion
Shanda,
to
this is a
first
second.
vote to endorse.
Shanda, this is a second. This is John Weibel. I'd like to second Dr. Gore's motion so we can actually lay this issue on the table and then discuss it.
Okay. So I heard a motion and a second. And I will, guys, Ryan is going to handle all of the motions and voting today for us. Before we do that, though, I think Dr. Joffrion, I think Joffrion Larkin, I can see both of y'all. Do y'all have sound now? Because I want to make sure we get y'all for the roll. Forward.
I would like to make a substitute motion to first consider the recommendations that were written and to vote to endorse with amendments or recommendations before we just vote to fully endorse as is.
Okay. Ryan, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay.
So we
So,
have a can you hear me? So we have
Yeah.
a motion to endorse the on-site review framework as presented. The motion was made by Mrs. Gore, seconded by Dr. Weibel. Do we have any public comment, Lori? Have we received any public comment?
None from the chat. Marcy, do we have anything coming across email?
Nothing in the email box.
And then we have a substitute motion by Dr. Flint to endorse the on-site review framework with revisions. Is that correct?
Yes, to endorse with
Do we have
amendments.
do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second that. This is Holly D'Amico.
So the motion on the floor is a motion to endorse the on-site review framework with amendments. Do we have any public, or do we have any discussion from the commission on this motion on the floor? Lori, do we have any public comment on this motion?
No, Ryan, none.
This is
Do any
John
commission
Weibel.
members
I'd like to
oppose
ask
this?
a question.
Dr. Weibel opposes the motion? Okay. Dr. Weibel opposes the motion to endorse the framework with amendments. Therefore, we will take a roll call vote on the substitute motion. Just so everyone's clear, the motion on the floor right now is a motion to endorse the on-site review framework with amendments. A vote of yes means you wish to endorse the framework with amendments. A vote of no means you do not wish to vote, or you do not wish to endorse the framework with amendments. Is everyone clear on that? Okay. And I'll take the roll call vote now. Mrs. Aguilar?
No.
Mrs. Anders?
No.
Mrs. Canizaro?
No.
Dr. Craig?
No.
Mrs. Curtis?
No.
Dr. D'Amico?
Yes.
Dr. Gore? I'm sorry,
No.
Dr. Flint?
Yes.
Dr. Flint votes yes. Dr. Gore?
No.
Mrs. Hamilton?
No.
Mr. Hartley?
No.
Mrs. Johnson?
no.
Mrs. Jackson?
No.
Dr. Joffrion?
Ryan, he is trying to get back in. Can we circle back to him at the end?
Mrs. Mangum?
No.
Dr. McAllister?
No.
Mrs. McNabb?
No.
Dr. Page?
Yes.
Dr. Perilou? Dr. Perilou?
Yes.
Dr. Brumley? No. Dr. Sonia Neto?
Yes.
And Dr. Weibel.
No.
Shanda, this is Dr. Haley. I came in late, so I wasn't here for the roll call. May I vote?
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Haley votes yes.
Yes. And Dr. Joffrion, were you able to get on? No? Okay. 2, 3, 4. We have 6 yeas and 15 nays. The substitute motion to endorse with amendments fails, which brings us back to the original motion on the floor, which is a motion by, which was a motion to endorse the framework as presented. Do we have one more time, any public comment on this one, Lori?
No comments.
Any discussion amongst the commission?
This is Holly D'Amico. Can I clarify that last vote was to endorse with amendments, correct?
That's correct.
And as amendments, that is something that the commission as a whole would pretty much be required to accept, whereas recommendations, they would just consider and not necessarily have to accept, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I'd like to make another substitute motion then, that the commission endorses the framework with the updated framework as recommendations rather than amendments.
Dr. Flint, I second the motion.
Could someone give some further clarification to that substitute motion?
Yes, the original substitute motion was to endorse the on-site review framework with amendments, meaning that if that motion had passed, the amendments would have made it into the ultimate framework. The substitute motion made by Dr. D'Amico and seconded by Dr. Flint endorses the on-site review framework with the recommended changes or recommended language added to the, or recommendations to be considered by the group. Those recommendations don't have to make it into the final framework, but it's on the record that recommendations were endorsed by the group. The amendments would have had to go into the framework, the recommendations don't. But it places on the record that recommendations were considered, and that was the will of the commission, was to have those recommendations considered. And the substitute motion on the floor now was made by Dr. D'Amico and seconded by Dr. Flint. Is there any discussion from the commission on this substitute motion?
Yes, I'd like to hear from the writers their thoughts based on Shanda's introductory remarks about forwarding those recommendations to the group, to the framework, I'm sorry, to the framework committee. It was my understanding that Shanda said they had received and considered set recommendations and felt those recommendations were appropriately incorporated as a part of our final commission report. Am I correct?
This is Holly D'Amico again, who just made this substitute motion. Yeah, I do recall, and that was my understanding of Shanda's comments. However, I think that the report that we put forward did include the general idea that the addition, or the, can't come up with the exact word that I'm searching for here, that the report included the idea that additional types of evidence-based practice should not necessarily be excluded or held against programs. That the report was a little wider and a little more inclusive, but that the language of this framework did not seem to indicate that.
Shanda, can you repeat your opening remark, please?
Yeah, so when I opened, I said that the suggestions that we had forwarded had been reviewed, and they determined not to make the suggested updates. This is because they felt the framework as it currently stands incorporates the recommendation from the ELC almost verbatim.
Thank you.
And this is Susanna Craig, and I think my only other comment is that, and I believe I stressed this at the last meeting, the Early Literacy Commission has really no purview over the work of the on-site review team and the work that they have done. And so they came, we asked them to consider our request once we developed our framework in the beginning, our report. They did consider our report and made some changes at that point based off what the framework said at that point. And again, we have no, they don't fall underneath our umbrella. So again, going back to endorse or not endorse are just my comments.
I'd just like to follow up, this is Dr. Flint, that if we endorse this with recommendations, that group that created the framework, like Ryan said, does not have to include our recommendations in the final framework. They don't have to use the language, but it will just put on the record that we're suggesting these as recommendations to be more inclusive of what the actual report stated, to be more broad and more inclusive of other evidence-based literacy components. So a vote of yes to endorse with these recommendations would just put it on the record that we're saying those things are important.
This is Elena Mangum. I think we need to remember the will of the group and that we are here for the students in early childhood. When we endorsed as our Early Literacy Commission, it was 100% unanimous that we were going to move forward with our report. And with Sarah and her group almost taking our verbiage verbatim to create this, ultimately, then we know that this is the right thing to get into the future hands of teachers and that information, because they are the direct connection to our youngest learners. And I think we are forgetting that the sole purpose of here is to have those educators ready to go when they are walking in that classroom with all students, regardless of race, culture, creed, background, and any disability. And so I'm just really happy that they moved forward with creating that document on their own. And thank you, Susie, and I know you were on that group as well, just wanting to move forward.
So
I just want
to,
to again.
Go ahead.
I certainly agree and appreciate with much of what Elena just suggested. I work as a speech language pathologist, which means that I work with children with all kinds of differences, disabilities, and certainly those children are in our schools and in our classrooms as well, in more and more inclusive environments, and broadening out the possible types of evidence-based practice that can benefit all of those groups of children that Elena mentioned is part of the spirit of these recommendations and of this amendment. I'm sorry, and of this motion.
And I just want to follow up, this is Dr. Flint again, that these recommendations don't change the inclusion of the 5 components of reading, which was what was included in the framework that was provided to us. It just adds writing and it adds other evidence-based literacy components. So it doesn't take away from that. And the language of our report that we all unanimously agreed to put forward said that reading instruction at the university or certification level would include the 5 components of reading, but not exclude all other strategies and techniques. So we just wanted to include these as recommendations, knowing that they may not accept them as recommendations, they may not include them, but just to note that we believe in more broad, inclusive language in the framework.
This is Elena, and I think we just have to, my concern is looking at that when we say broad, is that if we get so broad, then we are going to be including strategies or skills, things that are not based on how a child learns to read on cognitive or neuroscience. And I think that's with any educator, there are a million things that are out there. And if we go so broad, it's, the spray and pray. We are just putting so much out there and little that's effective. So we are sticking solely to the 5 components. And most importantly, that phonemic awareness and phonological awareness component, they are going to be equipped to then go into the classrooms.
And those 5 components are still included in our recommendation. And our recommendation doesn't use the word broad. It says utilizing the 5 components of reading, writing, and other evidence-based literacy components. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Exactly.
So Chanda, can we call for the vote on the motion?
Dr. Craig, before we call for the vote, I know that you serve on the Framework Commission.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see these recommendations as in conflict with the framework? Now that they're no longer amendments, they're now commission recommendations?
I really, Ms. Hamilton, I can't speak for the entire group. This work resides with the Louisiana Department of Education. And since I am at the Board of Regents, I would want the Department of Education to speak to this. But these recommendations have already been considered by the team. And the decision, according to Chanda, was to not make these recommendations. And so I again, all I can say is I believe that we are stepping a bit out of our lane here. And so that's really, I want to keep my comments a little more general because again, this work resides at the Department of Education and not the Board of Regents.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. This is
Sarah's on the call. So thanks, Sarah.
I just wanted to respond quickly to your question, Gwen, about this. And, I know this is something that we discussed at the commission meeting last month as well. The framework that was presented to all of you to request your endorsement was created with the consultation of teacher preparation providers throughout the state. We also had, as Dr. Craig mentioned, Dr. Craig was a member of the work group. We had Ms. Shan Davis from Bessie. They were all part of the work group. This work group met 7 times over the past year to consider updates to the framework. And as the updates to the framework were being considered, a huge piece of the work that group did was to determine, knowing how complex the work of teacher preparation is, what are the aspects that it is most important for teacher preparation providers to receive feedback on. And so over that year, over all of those meetings, the work group really dug in to determine, as a teacher preparation provider, knowing that my work is so complex, what are the areas that I believe are most important to receive feedback on. And so within the domain that is around content knowledge, the discussion of that group was around the fact that within this idea of how do you teach your new teachers to teach students how to read, the piece of that is of the utmost importance, which I think, Elena, you said very well, is this piece around, are we including the 5 components of effective literacy instruction? And so that work group determined, both based upon the discussions and also as we've said, based upon the report from the Early Literacy Commission, that it is very important to receive feedback there. A second discussion in that work group, which I think is important for all of you to know, is that in the work group, members have asked that the language that is included in the framework is as specific as possible so that there is no confusion around what the reviewers are looking at. And so I think the last thing that I will say around this is when the reviewers have a framework that says, provide feedback around the extent to which the 5 components of effective literacy instruction are included in coursework, that is specific, that is actionable. As soon as we add language that says, and other components, that leaves the framework up to considerable interpretation about what are these other components. And I think what we understand is that the research tells us that the teaching around the 5 components of literacy instruction is important. And as soon as we think about what are these other components, it becomes very unclear about what are those components, and therefore, how can reviewers provide actionable feedback?
Thank you so much, Sarah. I made the motion to delay action by this commission at the last meeting because I felt I needed time, as I stated, to review the framework because I'd only received it to review the framework to assure myself that the framework was not in conflict with the commission report. After that review, I am satisfied that it does in fact, it is not in fact in conflict with the commission report. Having said that, I would like to move approval of the framework without recommendations.
That motion is already on the table. There's a substitute motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That Dr. Weibel and Dr. Gore made that motion originally. We had a substitute. I just want to get everyone reoriented.
I have my parliamentary procedure out of order. Thank you.
So the motion on the floor right now is a motion by Dr. D'Amico, seconded by Dr. Flint, to endorse the on-site review framework with recommendations consistent with those submitted by Dr. D'Amico, Dr. Flint, Dr. Page, and Dr. Sonye Neto relative to indicator 2.1 of the framework. Does that capture your motion correctly, Dr. D'Amico?
It does.
This is the sign language interpreter. If you don't mind, whenever you're speaking, can you just say your name so that I can spell out who's talking? Thank you.
Yes, sir. It's Ryan Grimion at the Department of Education. So we have that motion on the floor by Dr. D'Amico, seconded by Dr. Flint, to endorse the on-site review framework with recommendations consistent with those submitted by Dr. D'Amico, Dr. Flint, Dr. Page, and Dr. Sonye Neto relative to indicator 2.1 of the on-site review framework. A vote of yes for this motion means that you do wish to endorse the framework with those recommendations. A vote of no suggests that you do not wish to vote for the framework with those recommendations. And before we take a vote, do we have any public comment, Lori?
No public comment, Ryan.
Does anyone have any questions about the motion on the floor? Hearing none, I'll start the roll call. Mrs. Aguilar?
No.
Votes no. Mrs. Anders?
No.
Mrs. Anders votes no. Mrs. Canizero?
No.
Mrs. Canizero votes no. Dr. Craig?
No.
Dr. Craig votes no. Mrs. Curtis?
No.
Mrs. Curtis votes no. Dr. D'Amico?
Yes.
Dr. D'Amico votes yes. Dr. Flint?
Yes.
Dr. Flint votes yes. Dr. Gore?
No.
Dr. Gore votes no. Dr. Haley? Dr. Haley, did we lose you?
I'm back. No.
No? Okay. Dr. Haley votes no. Mrs. Hamilton?
No.
Mrs. Hamilton votes no. Mr. Hartley?
No.
Mr. Hartley votes no. Mrs. Johnson?
No.
Johnson votes no. Mrs. Jackson?
No.
Mrs. Jackson votes no. Dr. Joffrion?
No.
Dr. Joffrion votes no. Mrs. Mangum?
No.
Mrs. Mangum votes no. Dr. McAllister?
No.
Dr. McAllister votes no. Mrs. McNabb?
No.
Mrs. McNabb votes no. Dr. Page?
Yes.
Dr. Page votes yes.
Dr. Page votes yes.
Dr. Pearlou?
Dr. Pearlou?
Yes.
Dr. Pearlou votes yes. Dr. Brumley?
No.
Dr. Brumley votes no. Dr. Sonia Neto?
Yes.
Dr. Sonia Neto votes yes. And Dr. Weibel?
No.
We have 6 yeas and 16 nays. The substitute motion fails, which brings the original motion back to the floor, which was made by Dr. Weibel, seconded by Dr. Gore, to endorse the on-site review framework as presented. Is there any discussion of the commission on this motion? Laurie, do we have any public comment on the motion?
No public comment.
And does anyone on the commission oppose the motion?
This is Holly D'Amico again. Yes, I'm opposed to the motion.
All right, so we will have a roll call vote on the motion on the floor, which is to endorse the on-site review framework as presented. A vote of yes means you do endorse the framework as presented. A vote of no means you do not endorse the framework as presented. Does anyone have any questions on the motion? Yes, we'll do the roll call. Mrs. Aguilar?
Yes.
Mrs. Anders?
Yes.
Mrs. Canizero?
Yes.
Dr. Craig?
Yes.
Mrs. Curtis?
Yes.
Dr. D'Amico?
No.
Dr. Flint?
No.
Dr. Gore?
Yes.
Dr. Haley?
Yes.
Mrs. Hamilton?
Yes.
Mr. Hartley?
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Jackson?
Yes.
Dr. Joffrion,
Yes.
Mrs. Mangum,
Yes.
Dr. McAllister,
Yes.
Mrs. McNabb,
Yes.
Dr. Page,
No.
Dr. Peralou,
No.
Dr. Brumley,
Yes.
Dr. Sonia Neto,
Yes.
and Dr. Weibel.
Yes.
With a vote of 18 yeas, 4 nays, the motion to endorse the on-site review framework as presented passes.
Thanks, Ryan. We appreciate you keeping us straight on our parliamentary procedure there. I do not see any public comment. Marcy, is any comment to the email?
No, ma'am, no public comment.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
And who was the second? I'm sorry. I know we need it for the minutes.
Richard Hartley.
John Weibel in the motion.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate you joining today. If there's anything that I can do for you before our next meeting, as always, feel free to email, call, text. And I'm looking forward to chatting with everyone soon. Y'all have a great week, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. You
Thank
guys
you.
too.
Thanks, Shanda.
Thank you.